Hello, this is Joey along with David and Seti, and today we have a very special topic to talk about on our podcast, Deep Conversations with ASMR. For today, we've each read one source and have contemplated how it relates to structural oppression. Specifically, we found that each of our sources describe institutional oppression, which is oppression based on societal structures that maintain an ideology. In each of our sources, we found that this type of oppression was shown through a classist lens, meaning that different socioeconomic classes were oppressed by institutions in each of our sources. Before we go into some of our questions about this type of oppression, let's hear from each of us what our sources were about.
The Handmaid's Tale, published and written by Margaret Atwood in the 1980s. This novel is about a handmaid named Offred and her point of view. This novel involves with the dangers of ideology of genders and sexual politics and the oppression it has on women and society in general.
Ruby the Scrivener is a short story written by Herman Melville. It's a social commentary on work in America, and it follows the story of Bartleby, who is a scrivener for a law firm on Wall Street. He decides to peacefully protest for his own reasons, and he ends up being thrown into prison for it.
My source, 1984, was written by George Orwell and was published in 1949. The novel's protagonist is Winston, who lives in a dystopian society run by the Party. The Party is an oppressive governmental institution that controls its civilians through constant surveillance and fear. The book follows Winston's journey to become aware and fight back against the Party.
And now for our first question, how do our sources display institutional oppression?
Well, in 1984, the government was the main institution that oppressed the lower and middle classes in the novel. They did this through different ministries, which is where the outer party, which was the middle class, worked. These ministries were the Ministry of Truth, which controlled entertainment and history. They also controlled law and order through the Ministry of Love, and controls war and maintains war through the Ministry of Peace, and also controls economic affairs through the Ministry of Plenty. The governmental institution would also go as far as to murder those who rebelled against it, to keep people in line and to stay under this institutional oppression. For example, on page 19 of Orwell's novel, the narrator states that in the vast majority of cases, there was no trial, no report of the arrest. People simply disappeared or vaporized. And this is referring to when people would try to think against the institutional oppression that was in place. What do y'all think about that?
All right, well, mine relates to 1984 in a way because there's this government and it takes over this U.S. government and it creates its own society, and there's institutional oppression because there's constrained rights of an individual in a society that is based on male/woman power relations. It also focuses on the excessive amount of mistreatment to men and women based on social identity.
In my source, the oppression is seen through like Marxist ideals, like most clearly through the law firm owner feeling disconnect with his employees because of the power he holds over them, and this can be seen when he like has his own separate office and forces all of his workers to work together in the other half of the office. And this is not just like, this isn't just in this law firm. He's being controlled by institutions on Wall Street, like such as like large businesses, and it's a larger scale issue than just the law firm.
All right, well, our second question, moving on, is in what way does your source display institutional oppression through a classist lens? Well, in Handmaid's Tale, there is a level of classism. So first it goes Handmaid's Tale, and then I forgot what goes above him, but it's like the cooks, I'm pretty sure, and then it goes like the commander's wives, the commander, the eyes. Do you know what they are?
And but I think the lowest one is actually the women who aren't able to give birth.
Yeah. All right. Well, obviously, other than that, the real role that women should play in society is affected by institutional oppression because it makes them more accountable to roles only women are dependent on and what men don't need to worry about. So obviously roles that men can't do, like obviously like fertility and trying to have kids, you know, and that's the sole purpose of every Handmaid's Tale in this book, and every handmaid is obviously a woman. And the society, implementing the society, there's only one purpose, and the only purpose is that they are worthless and they're non-contributors to helping society unless they can produce babies.
Yeah, so in 1984, this relates to what you're saying about the different classes that were within Handmaid's Tale. In George Orwell's book, there was the paroles, which was the lower class, the outer party, and then the inner party, which was the upper class. But each of the certain classes within this novel were all oppressed on different levels. The paroles, they had more freedom, which was apparent at the end of the book, than did those in the outer party. But they were still treated as imbeciles by the outer and inner parties. And this is seen in a quote from page 74 of the novel, which states that the party taught that the paroles were natural inferiors who want to be kept in submission like animals. And this shows that from the institution of education, that which is actually controlled by the larger institution of the party, each class learns this and accepts this. And even if they may not want to accept it at first, each class is so afraid to object this because they know going against the party would get them nowhere or even get them killed or caught by the thought police. The outer party is obviously still oppressed throughout this novel, which we can see through Winston's narration and how he does not have the ability to do certain things, such as find a wife he actually loves and wants to marry.
If I could add something,
Yeah.
I mean, I like the kind of comparison to animals. I think I can relate that to Bartleby the Scrivener because you see like the treatment of the workers by the like higher level people with power. You see they're treated like animals. They're kind of kept away, kind of caged up just to do their work. And I think the animal comparison is good for that book too.
Is there anything else you'd like to add for this?
I think in Bartleby it really shows the socioeconomic barrier of oppression, and I think that's kind of like, in my opinion, the most difficult to break out of because it like leads to differences in lifestyle and affects other types of oppression. You can kind of see this like at one point the wealthy like owner of the law firm like begins to kind of feel empathy towards Bartleby, but after thinking about it for a little bit, he realizes that like if everything seems okay and we all like everything seems happy, then everything must be happy, and therefore he just moves on and kind of continues to be ignorant in that way. And then we also see how Bartleby he's like a poor scrivener, and when he begins to rebel against the law firm, he is immediately thrown into prison. And I mean, that's really easy to kind of relate back to like modern day America, because we see that like prisons are like predominantly full of people who are in poverty because they're forced to do things to try to get themselves out of poverty.
And that actually kind of segues into our third question, which is how can the oppression seen in our sources relate to classist oppression in America? In America, there are many groups that have faced oppression similar to that seen in 1984. For example, Winston was forced to work a job he did not want to as part of a member of the outer party, similar to how African Americans were forced to work jobs they did not want to in America earlier in its time. Even though 1984 was written by a British author, the ideas can still relate to America and all other societies in the world. Orwell specifically stated on page 196 that the whole fictional world he was writing about was divided into 3 superstates that maintained a similar type of oppression. This must have been intentional to show that the problems exaggerated in 1984 were worldwide.
And to add to that, Bartleby, the Scrivener, is based is, like, the setting is Wall Street, but I think that the working conditions can be, like, generalized to all of America, like modern day America, because you see how the people with power treat their workers almost, well, like I said earlier, like animals, and they're definitely oppressed, and like you can just see that across America.
For our final question, institutional oppression is still seen in America today. For example, in 2017, Colin Kaepernick, the NFL quarterback, was silenced by the NFL for standing up to its oppressive ways. How does this relate to our sources?
Those of you who don't know too much about the Kaepernick situation, basically he started kneeling for the national anthem before games to stand up for, like, police brutality, racism, just oppressive factors such as those, and immediately he was cut from his team, and since that point he has received no tryouts or job offers from any NFL teams, despite being a very good quarterback.
Well, that kind of relates to 1984. With Winston, he tried to stand up to the inner party to Big Brother towards the end of the novel. And when he did this by doing certain things that were not allowed by the party, for example, trying to find the truth in what was happening in the past, as well as finding a girl to have sex with, he ended up being caught by the thought police, and they were brought to prison. This is similar to Kaepernick because the prison that he faced just took away his life, and the NFL basically took away Kaepernick's life from the NFL with no more way to make an income or live how he used to be living. So that's how I really think it relates to mine, especially because Kaepernick was standing up for the lower classes in American society, and Winston was also standing up for not only the outer party that he was part of, but also the paroles and everyone else that was living under the inner party.
Yeah, and this simply relates to Handmaid's Tale because when you look at Handmaid's Tale, you see Offred, and you see Offred as this handmaid, and these handmaids are very constricted to very, like, little rules, and they don't have a lot of freedom. Like, they can't make eye contact with other handmaids, they can't really, like, talk freely, and when they're sleeping, they're all sleeping in a room together, and they have, like, bedtimes, so they're very, like, how do you say the word, controlled, and very, like, constricted. They're very, like, looking at the handmaids, making sure they're not, like, doing anything wrong or bad, and only making them do what they want. And that connects to Kaepernick because this NFL is so big, and there are so many players in the NFL, and all these NFL big contracts, like, they constrict these players to what they can do and what they can't do. So it's very hard for the players to, like, express, like, their feelings, emotions, and their opinions. So that just connects to Handmaids.
Yeah, and one final thing I'd like to add is, like, the way it connects to Bartleby is in Bartleby you see one particular person doing the oppressing, and that's the owner of the law firm, and that can relate to the situation because I don't know if you've seen, but Donald Trump has come out and very, very blatantly criticized Kaepernick and anyone who supports him, saying that it's disrespectful to the country, disrespectful to the flag and such, and I think that the owner of the law firm definitely is similar to Donald Trump in this situation.
All right, well, that just about wraps up all the questions that we have relating to our sources. Thank you for listening, and now, of course, this is the ASMR podcast, so for what you've been waiting for, a little bit of that.